Chapter 25. It was lucky that the Padre should have been at Kayoktada, for he was able, before catching the train on the following evening, to read the burial service in due form and even to deliver a short address on the virtues of the dead man. All Englishmen are virtuous when they are dead. Accidental death was the official verdict. Drudadar Veeraswamy had proved with all his medico-legal skill that the circumstances pointed to accident, and it was duly inscribed upon the tombstone. Not that anyone believed it, of course. Florey's real epitaph was the remark, very occasionally uttered, "For an Englishman who dies in Burma is so soon forgotten, Florey." Oh yes, he was a dark chap. With a birthmark, he shot himself in Kayoktada in 1926. Over a girl, people said, "Bloody fool." Probably no one, except Elizabeth, was much surprised at what had happened. There is a rather large number of suicides among the Europeans in Burma, and they occasion very little surprise. Florey's death had several results. The first and most important of them was that Drudadar Veeraswamy was ruined, even as he had foreseen. The glory of being a white man's friend, the one thing that had saved him before, had vanished. Florey's standing with the other Europeans had never been good, it is true, but he was after all a white man, and his friendship conferred a certain prestige. Once he was dead, the doctor's ruin was assured. Upokayan waited the necessary time, and then struck again, harder than ever. It was barely 3 months before he had fixed it in the head of every European in Kayoktada that the doctor was an unmitigated scoundrel. No public accusation was ever made against him. Upokayan was most careful of that. Even Ellis would have been puzzled to say just what scoundrelism the doctor had been guilty of, but still, it was agreed that he was a scoundrel. By degrees, the general suspicion of him crystallized in a single Burmese phrase, to shock. Veeraswamy, it was said, was quite a clever little chap in his way, quite a good doctor for a native, but he was thoroughly shocked. Shocked means, approximately, untrustworthy, and when a native official comes to be known as shocked, there is an end of him. The dreaded nod and wink passed somewhere in high places, and the doctor was reverted to the rank of assistant surgeon and transferred to Mandalay General Hospital. He is still there, and is likely to remain. Mandalay is rather a disagreeable town. It is dusty and intolerably hot, and it is said to have 5 main products, all beginning with P, namely pagodas, pariahs, pigs, priests and prostitutes, and the routine work of the hospital is a dreary business. The doctor lives just outside the hospital grounds, in a little bake house of a bungalow with a corrugated iron fence round its tiny compound, and in the evenings he runs a private clinic to supplement his reduced pay. He has joined a second-rate club frequented by Indian pleaders. Its chief glory is a single European member, a Glasgow electrician named MacDougall, sacked from the Irrawaddy Flotilla Company for drunkenness, and now making a precarious living out of a garage. MacDougall is a dull lout, only interested in whiskey and magnetos. The doctor, who will never believe that a white man can be a fool, tries almost every night to engage him in what he still calls cultured conversation, but the results are very unsatisfying. Kosella inherited 400 rupees under Florey's will, and with his family he set up a tea shop in the bazaar. But the shop failed, as it was bound to do with the 2 women fighting in it at all hours, and Kosella and Ba P were obliged to go back to service. Kosla was an accomplished servant. Besides the useful arts of pimping, dealing with money lenders, carrying master to bed when drunk and making pick-me-ups known as prairie oysters on the following morning, he could sew, darn, refill cartridges, attend to a horse, press a suit, and decorate a dinner table with wonderful, intricate patterns of chopped leaves and dyed rice grains. He was worth 50 rupees a month, but he and Bupi had fallen into lazy ways in Florey's service, and they were sacked from one job after another. They had a bad year of poverty, and little Ba Shin developed a cough, and finally coughed himself to death one stifling hot weather night. Kosla is now a second boy to a Rangoon rice broker with a neurotic wife who makes unending kit, and Bupi is Pani, Walla in the same house at 16 rupees a month. Mahla May is in a brothel in Mandalay. Her good looks are all but gone, and her clients pay her only 4 annas and sometimes kick her and beat her. Perhaps more bitterly than any of the others, she regrets the good time when Florey was alive, and when she had not the wisdom to put aside any of the money she extracted from him. U-Po-Kayan realized all his dreams except one. After the doctor's disgrace, it was inevitable that U-Po-Kayan should be elected to the club, and elected he was, in spite of bitter protests from Ellis. In the end, the other Europeans came to be rather glad that they had elected him, for he was a bearable addition to the club. He did not come too often, was ingratiating in his manner, stood drinks freely, and developed almost at once into a brilliant bridge player. A few months later, he was transferred from Kyoctada and promoted. For a whole year before his retirement, he officiated as deputy commissioner, and during that year alone he made 20,000 rupees in bribes. A month after his retirement, he was summoned to a durbar in Rangoon to receive the decoration that had been awarded to him by the Indian government. It was an impressive scene, that durbar. On the platform, hung with flags and flowers, sat the governor, frock-coated, upon a species of throne, with a bevy of aides, de-camp and secretaries behind him. All round the hall, like glittering waxworks, stood the tall, bearded sowers of the governor's bodyguard, with pennoned lances in their hands. Outside, a band was blaring at intervals. The gallery was gay with the white ingis and pink scarves of Burmese ladies, and in the body of the hall 100 men or more were waiting to receive their decorations. There were Burmese officials in blazing Mandalay pazos, and Indians in cloth of gold pagris, and British officers in full dress uniform with clanking sword, scabbards, and old thuggies with their gray hair knotted behind their heads and silver, hilted das slung from their shoulders. In a high, clear voice a secretary was reading out the list of awards, which varied from the CIE to certificates of honor in embossed silver cases. Presently U-Po-Kayan's turn came, and the secretary read from his scroll to U-Po-Kayan, Deputy Assistant Commissioner, retired, for long and loyal service, and especially for his timely aid in crushing a most dangerous rebellion in Kyoctada district, and so on and so on. Then 2 henchmen, placed there for the purpose, hoisted U-Po-Kayan upright, and he waddled to the platform, bowed as low as his belly would permit, and was duly decorated and felicitated, while Makin and other supporters clapped wildly and fluttered their scarves from the gallery. U-Po-Kayan had done all that mortal man could do. It was time now to be making ready for the next world, in short, to begin building pagodas. But unfortunately, this was the very point at which his plans went wrong. Only 3 days after the governor's durbar, before so much as a brick of those atoning pagodas had been laid, U-Po-Kayan was stricken with apoplexy and died without speaking again. There is no armor against fate. Makin was heartbroken at the disaster. Even if she had built the pagodas herself, it would have availed U-Po-Kayan nothing. No merit can be acquired save by one's own act. She suffers greatly to think of U-Po-Kayan, where he must be now wandering in God knows what dreadful subterranean hell of fire, and darkness, and serpents, and genii. Or even if he has escaped the worst, his other fear has been realized, and he has returned to the earth in the shape of a rat or a frog. Perhaps at this very moment a snake is devouring him. As to Elizabeth, things fell out better than she had expected. After Florey's death, Mrs. Lackerstein, dropping all pretenses for once, said openly that there were no men in this dreadful place, and the only hope was to go and stay several months in Rangoon or Mamio. But she could not very well send Elizabeth to Rangoon or Mamio alone, and to go with her practically meant condemning Mr. Lackerstein to death from delirium tremens. Months passed, and the rains reached their climax, and Elizabeth had just made up her mind that she must go home after all, penniless and unmarried, when Mr. MacGregor proposed to her. He had had it in his mind for a long time. Indeed, he had only been waiting for a decent interval to elapse after Florey's death. Elizabeth accepted him gladly. He was rather old, perhaps, but a deputy commissioner is not to be despised. Certainly he was a far better match than Florey. They are very happy. Mr. MacGregor was always a good-hearted man, but he has grown more human and likable since his marriage. His voice booms less, and he has given up his morning exercises. Elizabeth has grown mature surprisingly quickly, and a certain hardness of manner that always belonged to her has become accentuated. Her servants live in terror of her, though she speaks no Burmese. She has an exhaustive knowledge of the civil list, gives charming little dinner parties, and knows how to put the wives of subordinate officials in their places. In short, she fills with complete success the position for which nature had designed her from the first, that of a Burra Mem Sahib,